On a moonless night in February of 2010, in a mud-walled compound in the Marjah district of Helmand province, Afghanistan, two doors were being approached at the same instant. The door on the eastern side of the compound was being approached by four men from the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the unit the world calls SEAL Team 6. The door on the western side was being approached by four men from B Squadron, 22 SAS. Neither team would breach until both teams were set. 45 seconds from that moment, both doors would blow at the same heartbeat. Inside the compound was a man whose name had appeared on a target list in two languages, English on one printout, Pashto on the other. The same man, the same night, two doors. This is the story of those two doors and the dozens of others like them that opened across central Helmand in the spring of 2010. It is the story of one of the most quietly remarkable partnerships in modern military history. The men of B Squadron, 22 SAS, working shoulder to shoulder with the men of DEVGRU, two of the three most secretive special operations units in the world, operating in the same compounds, on the same nights, hunting the same names, sharing the same helicopters back to the same base in the same desert. There was no rivalry on those nights. There were only doors. The British went through theirs. The Americans went through theirs. And then both teams walked out into the cold Helmand dawn and rode home together. Sometimes in the same Chinook, sometimes in the same Black Hawk, always with the same look on their faces, the look that says, a job is done. To understand what those two doors meant, you have to understand the place they stood in. Marjah, in February of 2010, was not a town in any sense that a Western reader would recognize. It was a sprawl, a patchwork of mud-walled compounds spread across irrigated farmland in central Helmand. It sat roughly 25 miles southwest of Lashkar, the provincial capital. Around 80,000 people lived there. By Western numbers, that made it a small town. By Helmand numbers, it made it a city of consequence. And by 2010, it was the single largest piece of ground in southern Afghanistan that the Taliban controlled completely. They had controlled it since September of 2008. They ran the bazaars. They ran the courts. They ran the schools. They ran the poppy harvest. And the poppy harvest in Marjah ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The town was the financial spine of the insurgency in the south. Take Marjah, and you took the money. Take the money, and you took the war. This was the logic behind Operation Moshtarak. The word is Dari. It means together. It was chosen deliberately. The Afghan government wanted the operation framed as a national effort, not a foreign invasion, and the name was a piece of public diplomacy as much as it was a piece of military planning. The operation launched on the 13th of February 2010. 15,000 troops took part. American, British, Afghan, Canadian, Danish, and Estonian. It was the largest joint operation of the Afghan war up to that point, the largest single offensive since the original invasion in 2001. The conventional side of Moshtarak was the part the world saw. The Marines of 1st Battalion, 6th Marines and 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines flew into Marjah on the morning of the 13th in waves of helicopters and began the slow, dangerous business of clearing improvised explosive device belts and walled compounds. The British and their Afghan partners moved on. Nad Ali, Brigadier Larry Nicholson, commanding the American Marines, and Major General Nick Carter, commanding NATO forces in the south, were the public faces of the offensive. The flag-raising ceremony in the Marjah Bazaar on the 25th of February, attended by Helmand's governor, Mohammad Gulab Mangal, was the public symbol of victory. But the part the world did not see, the part that started weeks before the Marines lifted off and continued for months after the flag went up, was the work being done in the dark. The work being done by two squadrons of men whose existence the British and American governments never officially confirmed in the same sentence. That work was done by SAS B Squadron and by DEVGRU, and it was done together. To understand how those two units came to be working the same doors on the same nights, you have to go back to Iraq. In Baghdad, in the years after 2003, a target methodology had been built that would change how special operations were done in the West. It was forged inside Joint Special Operations Command, under the direct command of then Lieutenant General Stanley McChrystal. The methodology was called F3EAD. The letters stand for Find, Fix, Finish, Exploit, Analyze, Disseminate. 6 steps. A cycle, not a line. Each raid produced intelligence. The intelligence produced the next raid. The next raid produced more intelligence. And so it went, night after night, faster than the enemy could regenerate. The thing that made F3EAD work was not the raid. It was the exploit, the phones, the notebooks, the hard drives, the pocket litter, the detainees. The contents of the compound mattered more than the body count of the compound. Every man captured was a name on a wall that led to 10 more names on a wall. Every phone was a contact list. Every contact list was a network, and the network was what was being dismantled. Not the individuals, the lattice. McChrystal had taken this methodology to Iraq and run it against Al-Qaeda in Iraq until the network had been bled white. In 2009, he was given command of ISAF, the International Security Assistance Force, in Afghanistan. He brought F3EAD with him. He brought something else with him too. He brought a habit of inter-unit and inter-allied cooperation that had been hammered out in the back rooms of MSS Fernandez, the JSOC station in Baghdad, where SAS officers had spent years working out of the same operations centers. That habit traveled. By the time McChrystal sat down to plan Moshtarak, the joint targeting architecture was already in place. The British contribution was a formation known as Task Force 42. Task Force 42 had been UK Special Forces Afghanistan Command since the mid-2000s. Originally built around the Special Boat Service, it had expanded as the Iraq War wound down. With the UK withdrawal from Iraq in 2009, 2 squadrons of 22 SAS were freed up. They were sent east. One of them was B Squadron. The American side was Task Force Blue. That was the JSOC designation for DEVGRU. Their assault squadrons had been rotating through Afghanistan since 2005. By 2010, they were on a regular 6-month cycle mode. Their operations were planned out of a joint operations center at Camp Leatherneck, the sprawling American Marine base built next to the British logistics hub at Camp Bastion. The 2 camps together held more than 30,000 personnel by mid-2010. They shared a runway, a perimeter, and in the secure compound at the edge of the airfield, a planning room. That planning room was where the lists were made. The targets were called HVTs, high-value targets, or HVIs, high-value individuals. They came off a document called the Joint Prioritized Effects List, the JPEL. By 2010, the JPEL for southern Afghanistan ran to hundreds of names. Some were Taliban shadow governors, the men who collected taxes and adjudicated disputes in the parallel government the Taliban had built in Helmand. Some were narcotics network heads, the men who moved the opium from the fields to the borders. Some were IED facilitators, the men who bought the artillery shells and the fertilizer and the wire and built the bombs that were tearing the legs off coalition soldiers, at a rate that horrified anyone who saw the casualty lists. In the weeks before the main Marjah assault, the JPEL became the work order. Prior to the main attack of February 13th, US Navy SEALs and British Special Forces conducted kill or capture raids that took approximately 50 named enemy leaders off the field. 50 in a few weeks. The mathematics of those weeks tells you something about the tempo at which the 2 units were operating. They were not raiding a compound a week. They were raiding compounds every night, sometimes more than one a night, sometimes 2 doors on the same compound, at the same instant, in the dark. The SAS approach to its door, on that February night, was not the approach the films show. There was no roar of engines, no shouting. The 4 men of the SAS troop had been on the ground for 40 minutes by the time they reached the western wall of the compound. They had been dropped from a Royal Air Force Chinook at a landing zone 3 kilometers to the south. The Chinook had stayed in the air for less than 90 seconds. It had not landed. It had flared and hovered just long enough for the team to roll off the ramp into the irrigated dirt of a poppy field. Then it was gone. The SEAL approach to its door, on the same compound, on the same night, was being made from the other direction. The 4 men of the DEVGRU troop had been dropped from a Black Hawk flown by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. The Night Stalkers. The Night Stalkers had inserted them at a landing zone 2 kilometers to the north, same minute as the British insertion. Different bird, different ground, same target. The SAS men carried L11, 9 A1 carbines, a British modified version of the DEVGRU C8. Suppressed, night optics. Each man wore a Cry precision combat uniform in multicam, the new pattern that was already replacing the older British desert camouflage in SAS troops by late 2009. Their helmets carried 4.2 panoramic night vision goggles, the kind that gave a 120-degree field of view in the dark, the kind that turned a moonless night in Helmand into a green-tinted afternoon. The SEAL men carried HK-416S, a heavier-barreled variant, suppressed, same kind of optics, same kind of helmets, same kind of multicam, though theirs was the older Cry G3 pattern. Looking at the two teams in the dark, in their gear, in their movement, you would not have been able to tell them apart at any distance over 20 meters. That was deliberate. That was years of cross-training and shared procurement and shared procedure. The two units had drilled together on ranges in North Carolina and at the SAS training area in Wales for so long that their breaching techniques, their stack formations, their target discrimination protocols had all converged. The SAS troop crossed the last 100 meters of open ground at a walk, not a run. Running is loud. Walking is silent if you know how to walk. The breacher was at the front. The number 2 was on his shoulder, watching the wall. The number 3 was watching the alleyway to the south. The number 4 was watching the alleyway to the north. None of them spoke. There was no need to speak. Every man knew where the other 3 were without looking. The SEAL troop made the same crossing on the other side of the compound at the same walk. Same formation, same silence, same 100 meters. Both teams reached their respective walls at almost exactly the same instant. There was a 4-second variance. The American team got there first. They held. They did not breach. They waited. There was an iron rule on a joint operation. Neither door blew until both doors were ready. A radio click came over the team net. Single click. That was the SAS troop reporting set. 2 clicks came back. That was the SEAL troop confirming set. A 3rd click came from somewhere above and miles away. That was the AC-130 gunship orbiting at 12,000 feet, confirming overwatch and clear airspace. A 4th click came from the Joint Operations Cell at Camp Leatherneck, permission to execute. The clicks took less than 3 seconds. The SAS breacher placed his charge against the western door. The SEAL breacher placed his against the eastern. Both charges were small. Small enough not to bring down the wall. Small enough not to kill anyone inside the room behind the door by overpressure. Just enough to take the door off its hinges. The breachers stepped back. Each man covered his ears with his free hand. Each man counted in his head from 3. The doors blew at the same instant. The SAS team went through the western door in a formation called a stack. Number 1 left. Number 2 right. Number 3 to the corner. Number 4 securing the entrance. The first room was a sleeping area. 2 adult men were on charpoy beds against the far wall. Both were reaching for weapons that lay beside their pillows. The SAS team did not give them the time to reach them. 2 short bursts, suppressed. The 2 men slumped back. The SAS team moved through to the inner courtyard. The SEAL team came through the eastern door at the same instant, in the same formation. Their first room was a kitchen. Empty. They cleared it in less than 4 seconds. They moved into the courtyard at the same moment the SAS team was emerging from the western sleeping area. The 2 teams met in the middle of the courtyard. They knew each other was coming. They had rehearsed this exact moment. There was no friendly fire incident, because there was no friendly fire incident. Allowed. The SAS team moved right. The SEAL team moved left. They cleared the remaining rooms of the compound in a synchronized sweep. In a room at the back, behind a curtain of woven goat hair, they found the man whose name had been on both target lists. He was crouched in the corner with a Makarov pistol in his hand. He did not raise it. He looked at the 4 green-lensed faces in the door, and he understood, in the way that only a man at the end understands, that the night was over. He set the pistol on the floor. He raised his hands. The SEAL number 2 zip-tied him. The SAS number 3 searched him. The SAS number 1 called it in. What happened in the next 40 minutes was the part of the operation that mattered, the part that made all the other parts worth doing, the exploit phase. The two teams turned the compound upside down, not violently, methodically. Every cushion, every storage chest, every hollow in every wall. The SEAL exploit specialist had a laptop and a portable hard drive imager. The SAS exploit specialist had a camera and a logbook. Every phone found was photographed in place, bagged, and tagged. Every notebook was photographed page by page. Every wad of currency was counted and photographed. Every weapon was logged with serial number. The SAS pulled a satellite phone out of a wall cavity behind the prayer mat. The SEAL pulled 3 USB drives out of a hollowed-out copy of the Quran. The SAS found a notebook with 2 columns of names, Pashto names on the left, coordinates on the right. The SEAL found a Nokia handset with 147 numbers in the contacts list. The 2 exploit specialists worked side by side. They photographed and tagged and bagged. The detained man sat zip-tied in the corner watching them. He understood what was happening. Every piece of paper, every phone, every USB drive in that compound was about to become the basis for 10 more raids. Maybe 50, maybe 100. The network he had built was being dismantled in real time, around him, by men who did not need to ask him anything because they were going to find it all in his own kitchen. The intelligence flow back from those compounds was the engine of the whole campaign. By the time the helicopters landed back at Camp Leatherneck, the contents of the SEAL hard drive imager and the SAS photo log were already being moved. They went into a fusion cell at the Joint Operations Center. The fusion cell was the architectural innovation that McChrystal had imported from Iraq. Inside it, sitting at the same row of workstations, were a DEVGRU intelligence officer, an SAS signals analyst, a CIA case officer, a Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, and an officer from the British Government Communications Headquarters. They sat together, they drank coffee together, they argued together, and they ran the contents of every captured device through every system at their disposal in real time. A Pashto name in a notebook went to the Defense Intelligence Agency for biographic match. A phone number went to the National Security Agency for traffic analysis. A bank account number went to the Financial Network Targeting Cell. A coordinate went to the Geospatial Intelligence Team. Inside 90 minutes of the helicopter's landing, the next target was usually identified. Inside 3 hours, the next raid was usually planned. Inside 6 hours, the next teams were usually briefing. Inside 12 hours, the next compound was usually being approached by 2 men from B Squadron and 4 men from DEVGRU, or by 4 from each, or by 6 and 2. The mix was fluid. It depended on the target. It depended on who was up on the cycle. It depended on what skills the compound was going to require. What allowed all of this to happen, what allowed the men of 2 separate national militaries, with 2 separate command chains, and 2 separate legal frameworks, and 2 separate weapons procurement systems, to walk through the same compound on the same night and trust each other with their lives, was not luck. It was years of work. It was relationships that had been built in the dust of Iraq. It was a generation of British and American special operators who had cut their teeth on the same set of streets in Baghdad and who knew each other by first name and call sign. Many of the SAS squadron leaders on the ground in Helmand in 2010 had served as captains and majors in TF Black, the British element of the Iraq task force, alongside DEVGRU officers who were now their counterparts in TF Blue. They had eaten the same chow. They had lost the same friends. They had argued about the same operations. They had fixed each other's broken radios and shared each other's painkillers and gone to each other's medal ceremonies. There was, by 2010, a piece of folklore that circulated among the 2 units. It was said, only half in joke, that the SAS and DEVGRU spoke a third language between them. Not English, not American, a patois of acronyms and call signs and tactical shorthand that no one outside the 2 units could follow. A man could sit in a JOC at Bagram and listen to the 2 teams running an operation over the net and only catch every fourth word. The teams understood each other completely. They had built a shared dialect of war. The political sensitivities of acknowledging any of this publicly were enormous. The British government, by long-standing convention, did not comment on the operations of UK Special Forces. The phrase used in Parliament was that the Ministry of Defence did not confirm or deny the existence of such operations. The American government, by a slightly different convention, was a little more open about JSOC's existence, but never confirmed individual operations. Joint operations were a third category of sensitivity. To acknowledge that B Squadron, 22 SAS, was on a compound in Marjah at 0330 on a Wednesday in February of 2010 was a matter of bilateral state policy, not a press release. The two governments treated the partnership as a piece of jewelry, valuable, quiet, locked away when not in use. The press got pieces of it. Reporters in Helmand picked up that something was happening at night. The release of the Afghanistan war logs by WikiLeaks in July of 2010 exposed the existence of Task Force 42 and confirmed its capture or kill mission. McChrystal himself, after his removal in June of 2010, wrote a memoir, My Share of the Task, that confirmed the broad outlines. The intelligence and operational mechanics, the F3EAD cycle, the fusion cells, the integration of allied units, all of it became public over the years that followed. But the specifics of which compound, on which night with which men remain, to this day, almost entirely classified. The two doors are documented. The names of the four men at each door are not. The night the two doors blew was one night. The campaign was many nights. From late January of 2010 through the early summer, the joint hunter-killer teams were working at a tempo of multiple operations per night across central Helmand. Some were straightforward kill or capture raids on individual targets. Some were more elaborate. A target might be tracked through a sequence of mobile phones for a week before he was hit. A target might be allowed to keep moving for 10 days because the signal intelligence picture was producing more value than the capture would have. A target might be hit deliberately as a piece of bait to see who came to the funeral. The fusion cells got more sophisticated by the week. The two units got faster. In one stretch in late February, in the week between the main Marjah assault and the flag raising on the 25th, the joint SAS and DEVGRU teams reportedly hit 12 compounds in 7 nights, 12 across 3 districts. With no friendly casualties, the compounds yielded what one British officer later described, in a single sentence, that escaped into a Sunday newspaper as a strategic harvest: phones, notebooks, detainees, money. The harvest was put through the fusion cell, and the next 12 compounds were identified in the week after. The compound in Marjah where the two doors blew, the compound that opens this story, was one of those 12. The man captured inside it was not the most senior figure on the JPEL, but he was a hub. He was a banker. He was the man who moved the Quetta Shura's money from the Pakistani border into the Marjah poppy economy. His capture cut a tendon in the financial network. The first replacement appointed by the Quetta Shura to take over his role was named in a captured satellite phone within 36 hours. That man, in turn, was on a target list within 72 hours. The cycle did not stop. There is a particular kind of trust that has to exist between two units that work the same compound at the same instant. It is not the trust of friendship, though friendships did form. It is not the trust of national alliance, though the alliance certainly mattered. It is the trust of professional certainty. The kind of trust that says, when I clear my corner of this room, my brother on the other side of the courtyard is clearing his at the same speed and to the same standard, and we will meet in the middle without shooting each other. That trust does not come from politics. It comes from the range. It comes from years of standing next to each other on the same training facility, doing the same drill, at the same level of standard. The SAS and DEVGRU had reached, by 2010, a tactical interoperability that has very few parallels in the history of Allied warfare. It is reasonable to say that on the question of close-quarters combat in a Helmand compound at 3 in the morning, those two units operated as a single force. The aviation side of the partnership was no less remarkable. The Royal Air Force Chinooks of 27 Squadron and the American MH-47s of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment moved interchangeably across the same airspace. A British team might insert on an American bird. An American team might extract on a British one. The Apache gunships of the British Army Air Corps and the AHS 64 DS of the American Army flew the same Overwatch missions for the same compounds. When close air support was required for a team in trouble, the support came from whichever airframe was on station. The flag on the wing was secondary. The grid reference on the map was primary. The men on the ground got their cover. The Camp Leatherneck and Camp Bastion complex itself was the physical embodiment of the partnership. The two camps were technically separate, but they shared a perimeter. The single runway hosted both fleets. The chow halls on either side served personnel of both nations. The Joint Operations Centre, where the JSOC and UK Special Forces planners worked side by side, had, by mid-2010, become so integrated that some observers from outside the special operations community joked that it would be easier to identify which staff officers were not foreign nationals. The planning, the targeting, the rehearsal, the briefing, the execution, the debrief, all of it happened in a single physical and procedural envelope. Two nations, one mission. The strategic results of the campaign were less clear than the tactical successes. Marjah was cleared. The flag went up on the 25th of February. The Marines stayed. The British shaped the Najd Ali side. By the spring of 2010, on paper, the operation was a triumph. But within 3 months, the Taliban began to seep back into the surrounding rural areas. McChrystal himself, in May of 2010, used the phrase bleeding ulcer in front of reporters to describe the post-clearance phase of Marjah. The local population, surveyed by coalition researchers in the spring, expressed widespread skepticism that the Taliban would not return. 59% of Marjah residents in one survey said they expected the Taliban to come back. They were not wrong, but the targeting campaign, the one conducted in the dark by men whose names were never released, achieved exactly what it was designed to achieve. It dismantled the senior and mid-level Taliban command structure in central Helmand. It killed or captured the men who ran the bombs. It killed or captured the men who appointed the shadow governors. It did this at a pace and at a precision that no conventional campaign could have matched. The fact that the broader war was lost over the following 11 years does not erase the fact that on the question of decapitating an insurgent network in a defined operational area, the joint SAS DEVGRU campaign of the spring of 2010 was one of the most effective applications of special operations targeting in modern history. It is impossible to count exactly how many compounds were entered. The official records remain classified on both sides. Educated estimates, drawn from journalist reporting and from later memoirs, put the figure for joint SAS DEVGRU raids in central Helmand in the first 6 months of 2010 at somewhere between 100 and 150. Most yielded captures rather than kills. The methodology preferred capture. A captured man, properly exploited, was worth far more than a dead one. A captured man's phone, his contacts, his bank account, his statement under interrogation, his identification of photographs, all of it fed back into the cycle. The cycle was the war. There were losses. The two units did not get through 6 months of compound raids in Helmand without casualties. The exact figures are classified, and the specific incidents remain unconfirmed. There were nights when things went wrong. There were nights when the door blew and the interior of the compound was rigged with secondary charges. There were nights when the target was not the target. There were nights when civilians were inside. The Joint Task Force took those nights seriously. The two governments took them seriously. The Ministry of Defense in London and the Pentagon in Arlington reviewed the operational records in detail. The standards did not slip. The campaign continued. What allowed the campaign to continue was the same thing that had allowed the two units to operate door-to-door in the first place. The trust. Not just the trust between the SAS and DEVGRU, though that was central. The trust between the operators and the fusion cell. The trust between the fusion cell and the commanding generals. The trust between the commanding generals and the governments in London and Washington. It was a thin line of trust, running from a sergeant kneeling in a poppy field outside Marjah at 3 in the morning to a meeting in a basement at the National Security Council in Washington 12 hours later. The line held. By the early summer of 2010, the rhythm of the campaign began to change. McChrystal was removed in June over comments published in Rolling Stone magazine that were considered insubordinate to the civilian leadership. He was replaced by General David Petraeus. The targeting cycle did not slow under Petraeus. If anything, it accelerated. The two-doors model continued for another 2 years before the political winds began to shift and the drawdown began to be planned. The man captured in that compound in Marjah in February of 2010 was transferred to Afghan custody after a period of exploitation at the Joint Detention Facility. His name has never been released. His ultimate fate is not part of the public record. The 74 phones recovered from his compound in the surrounding nights of operations produced, by one official estimate, more than 40 subsequent targeting packages. Most of those subsequent packages were executed. Some were not. The cycle continued through the spring and into the summer. The two doors closed. The compound where they had blown was within 48 hours demolished by Afghan workmen on orders from the new district governor's office. The man's family had moved out. The neighbors had moved out. The walls came down. The mud brick that had been the door went back into the earth from which it had been pulled. Within a season, the spot was indistinguishable from any other piece of poppy field in Marjah. A compound that had appeared on no map and been recorded only as a 6-digit grid reference in an operations log on a server at Camp Leatherneck was gone, unreferenced, unmarked, erased. At 0411 on the morning after the breach, the helicopters lifted from the landing zone in the dark. 2 pilots, 2 crews, 16 men, 1 target, captured, 1 target, dead. 2 doors that had not existed 9 hours earlier and would not exist again. A British Chinook and an American Black Hawk flew west together back toward the lights of Bastion and Leatherneck. The men inside the 2 birds did not speak. There was nothing to say. The work was the work. The next list was being printed on the next door in the Joint Operations Center, and by the time the helicopters touched down on the apron, the next set of names would be waiting on the wall. The story of those 2 doors is a story that the British and American governments have spent 15 years not telling. The basic outlines are now public. The mechanics of F3E, AD, are taught in war colleges. McChrystal's memoir confirms the broad strategy. The WikiLeaks war logs confirm the existence of Task Force 42. Open source reporting confirms the integration of B Squadron, 22 SAS, with DEVGRU in Helmand. But the specific compound, the specific night, the specific 4 men on each door, the specific name of the banker captured inside, will remain redacted in the official records for many decades to come. What can be said, with the certainty that comes from the broad consensus of the open record, is this. In the spring of 2010, in the irrigated farmland of central Helmand, a partnership of 2 of the world's 3 most elite special operations units conducted one of the most quietly devastating targeting campaigns in the history of irregular warfare. They did it together, not against each other, not in competition, with each other. The British went through their doors, the Americans went through theirs, and the men in both teams went home, sometimes on the same helicopter, to a base they shared with the same allies they had been working alongside for the better part of a decade. There were no statues for them. No medals were ever presented in public. No flags were ever raised over the compounds they had cleared. The man whose name appeared on the 2 target lists in 2 languages was processed, transferred, and forgotten. The men who had stood at his doors went on to other doors, other compounds, other nights, other targets. The cycle continued. But somewhere in a classified vault in Washington and another in Whitehall, the after-action reports of those nights still sit. They sit in 2 languages. They describe the same operations from 2 angles. They describe the same compounds, the same captures, the same intelligence harvests, the same dawns. And if anyone, sometime in the future, opens those 2 files and lays them side by side on a desk in some quiet reading room, in some quieter archive, they will see the most striking thing about the campaign. The 2 records, written by 2 services in 2 countries on 2 continents, described the same nights in almost identical detail, as if they had been written by the same hand. 2 doors, same compound, same instant, same trust. That was the campaign. That was the partnership. That was what it meant when McChrystal's planners gave the operation its Dari name. Moshtarak. Together. The doors closed. The helicopters lifted. The dawn came up over Bastion in the colors of a Helmand winter. And somewhere on a desk in the Joint Operations Center, the next list was already waiting.